What does your mechanic mean when he tells you that your engine has knocked? And what are the signs and symptoms of a knocked engine? And also, what are the things that you can do to avoid getting engine knock? So basically, there's two types of engine knock that you normally get your mechanic referencing when he tells you that your engine has knocked. And the first one we're going to talk about is the bottom side of your engine, which is the most easy for you to diagnose. So what we have here is the engine's crankshaft, and you've got the piston rod. So this is basically what connects your pistons to the crankshaft, and what you have sitting between the crankshaft and the rod is what are called bearings. So if we look at this cap right here, this piece that you're looking at is the same as this bottom piece right here, but in this case you can actually see the bearing that sits here. That's this little silver part that's on the inside. It's actually easier that I show you guys what it looks like. So these two bolts come out, and then you get the piston separated from the cap at the back of the rod. So this is basically the assembly, how it looks like. You can see this actually has bearings on the inside. This is what it looks like, and this is how it comes in. Sits like that, and that's what slides on the crankshaft. There's a very thin film of oil that runs between your bearing and where it sits on the crankshaft. That is obviously supplied by your oil pump, and that keeps this surface nice and lubricated so that there's no metal to metal contact between this bearing and your crankshaft. So when you get your engine to a point where it starts knocking, basically that's caused by oil starvation, which means that not enough oil is able to get to this surface on the crankshaft between the bearing and the crankshaft, and that ends up causing metal to metal contact, which wears out the bearing material very quickly and ends up making the gap between the crankshaft and the bearing wide, and that now starts to present itself as a knock sound. So you can see on this one right here, it shakes in and out a little bit, but these bearings are good, so there's not a lot of play. But when your car experiences oil starvation and it wears out the bearings, there ends up being more space between this bearing and the crankshaft, and that causes a knocking sound coming from the bottom of your engine. Another situation is just the general wear and tear. If your car is very high mileage, these things are not designed to last forever. There are some engines, yes, that have bearings that can go for hundreds of thousands of miles, but also there's just general wear and tear that happens on these, and they can eventually start to fail and cause the rod knock to start happening on your engine. So the best way you can protect yourself from this type of knock is making sure that you always change your engine oil on time, so that you don't have things like your oil filter or the oil pickup tube that picks up oil from your oil sump is not blocked, and you don't create a situation where any of these sections that meet with the piston's rod get dry. So if you just make sure that you're on top of your oil change, then you won't experience this type of knock. To be able to repair your engine after this type of knock always requires a specialized mechanic to take out all the rods and bearings on your engine, make sure that they change the bearings with genuine ones, and then put it all back together. So once you start to hear that type of knock sound, people will try and suggest you use thicker oil and stuff like that, but in general you're already at a point where you have to do a rebuild and get brand new bearings and machine a lot of the parts down here to get it back to the factory standard, where you won't have that knock sound. So it's a pretty expensive repair, but it can be avoided if you just make sure that you use good engine oil and make sure that your car doesn't have sludge and other things that can go ahead and block the oil supply to your crankshaft. The second type of knock that we're going to talk about happens within the cylinders of your engine, and I'm using this one because it actually has a knock sensor. So this has a knock sensor built into the block because this type of knock sometimes cannot be heard by the human ear. Can be for different reasons because of road noise and stuff like that, but in some cases you will be able to hear it, but you get a knock sensor on the block so that your engine ECU or computer box can actually hear that sound and let you know through a check engine light that you're actually experiencing knock. I have a disassembled engine right here to show you this, and that type of knock is called pinging or pre-detonation that happens within the cylinders. So basically, from how we understand how engines work, the only time that air and fuel is supposed to explode within the cylinders is when your spark plug fires. But there are situations where, for example, you may have carbon buildup on your pistons or even inside your cylinder walls, and that can create hot spots where your air fuel mixture can end up exploding before the spark actually fires. And what then ends up happening is that the wave front from the fuel that has exploded on your on your piston comes and meets the one that has exploded from your spark plug, and then that ends up causing a very strong pinging sound that comes from your engine. Sometimes you will be able to hear it, but most cars have a knock sensor built into them, which is basically like a small microphone, and I'll put a video up on the screen to show you some of the positions where your knock sensors can be located, but it's normally around where the cylinders are. On this one it's not attached, but I will have a video up there for you to see. So your engine will be able to detect that through the ECU, and it will throw an error code for it, which is a check engine light, and you'll be able to see on your diagnosis machine that your car is experiencing some knock. So basically, with this type of knock that's only detected by your engine's knock sensor, there's basically two things that can cause the knocking or the pinging that goes on inside your engine, or we can also call it pre-detonation. So one is using bad fuel that is not recommended for your engine. Higher performance engines use things like 93 octane fuel. So if you use for example an 85 octane fuel in your engine, then the likelihood of it detonating before the spark plug fires is very high, and that can cause pinging or knocking that can be detected by the knock sensor. So if you make sure that you're using the proper fuel in your car, just making sure that you use an octane booster. If you don't find the right fuel for your car, then your car will just be fine and your knock sensor will not detect any knock inside your engine. The second thing that can cause knock is overheating. So if the temperatures in your cylinders get too high, then you have hot spots around the pistons, or even sometimes carbon buildup around the pistons can cause hot spots around the cylinder, and that will cause those spots to ignite the air fuel mixture in your car instead of your spark plug, and that can cause the knock that will be detected by your engine's knock sensor. So this type of knock that's caused by pre-detonation is actually very dangerous and can cause some serious catastrophic failures, because if it is not corrected, whether it's by the engine retarding timing or you putting in better fuel, then you can have a situation where your air fuel mixture explodes way too early, and then it ends up causing things like cylinder pressures to go really high and bending rods, and even in some cases literally destroying the entire crankshaft and stuff like that. So you just have to make sure that if you get a check engine light from the knock sensor, you try and make the necessary checks that you need to do, because if you don't and you continue to drive, especially on high performance engines, you can have some serious damage to your engine, causing it to be a write-off and need replacement. So that was just a basic video about engine knock. If you're having any issues where you're hearing knocking sounds from the bottom end of your engine, you can definitely bring your car here to TuneX. And also we do have diagnosis machines, so if you get a check engine light and it could be the knock sensor, detecting problem with your engine, then we can also be able to diagnose and fix that as well. And as usual, if I left anything else that you guys want to suggest, you can leave it in the comments and we'll make another video. But yeah, I hope somebody learned something about engine knock, and I will see you guys on the next one.